When David hops in here, I just hit the go button and we go. It's go time. That's what we do. What's the roller coaster?
It was a heck of a presser yesterday.
It was a little bit. Yeah, we have a fun show, I think. KF was kind of on one in a spot where he normally wouldn't be on one. Wouldn't you say?
I thought the same thing. I thought he came out of the gate joking immediately, and I thought there was a time or two. I love overanalyzing this. It's so great. I thought he joked and he like overkilled a joke a little bit too much, and I kind of thought to myself, is Kirk nervous? Like it just for once it just seemed like he was slightly uncomfortable, and you cultivate that with. There was a notable name that he didn't talk about in his opening statement when it came to the injury front or returning from injury. And that ended up being what half the questions were about, Tyler.
Oh.
He didn't mention Cade McNamara in his opening statement.
What's the insinuation there? What is what's going on in the mind of David Eichel?
Well, I already had my tinfoil hat theory after talking to a couple of the players. I was going to save this for like 10 minutes in, but
no, drop it. I am curious. I didn't have any deeper like crazy thoughts about this other than one. I have maybe one. We're really open to the rabbit holes now.
I love a good rabbit hole.
But you go. This is good. Welcome into the press review show. David and I could go for 90 minutes today. Who knows? I don't know. In like an hour, there's supposed to be some announcement about Unrivaled. Maybe Caitlin Clark's going to be joining that. No?
No.
Unfortunately, this isn't a live show. So,
no,
after that announcement.
Stunned if she did.
Yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why she would.
The 22-minute clickbait. There can't have Caitlin and may as well use her number as clickbait.
I was gonna say. I mean, they if it's not her, they sure milk that thing. They're just milking the cash cow as much as you can. I mean, it's unbelievable. They want to say that she's not this or not that, but god damn, they use her every chance they can get, huh?
It would be one of the more stunning things of my journalism career if Caitlin ended up actually doing it.
We talked about that earlier this year, like a month ago. Like you got to offer her like there's got to be like 8 figures there. It's got to be something absurd. Anyway, back to football. Tinfoil hat, David. You guys get to talk to the players. So that's something that we don't get because we always see quotes. And actually, I saw somebody. I was right before you hopped in. I was trying to find a quote from I think it was Castro or Schulte yesterday about the inconsistency of the team. We'll get to that later. But you guys, for maybe the fans that don't glean this from just observation, you guys get the players first and then you go into
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we get the players at about 11 o'clock every Tuesday, maybe a little bit before. And, we got the chance. We talked to Luke Lachey. We talked to Caleb Johnson. We talked to a handful of other players. And this was the interesting thing. Luke Lachey was asked about Cade McNamara being back at practice. Didn't ask if he was hurt.
Yeah.
Didn't ask if he came back to practice. Because I think a player will answer if you say something along the lines of, hey, I heard they're back at practice. How good is it to have them back in the huddle? Like, what have you seen from them or whatever? Versus like you're asking a player to tell about somebody else's injury, right?
Right.
Luke Lachey said, I'm going to defer all the questions about that to the head coach. And immediately my alarms are going off in my head because I thought you could lie through that and nobody's going to bat an eye. Logan Jones said, it's great. He's a competitive practicer. He's ready to get back at it. Bo Stevens said the same thing as Luke Lachey. And then Caleb Johnson talked about Cade a little bit too. Right then and there, and I could be wrong about this, okay? Just FYI. Right then, I was convinced Jackson Stratton starting on Saturday.
And then, of course, you get to the press conference and he doesn't. I guess my takeaway, and I would recommend those who listen to this show watch the press conference because you get a lot. You get a lot from this, but you don't get it all. And I guess whether you call it nervous or just like, we talked about last week or a couple weeks ago, or it was with the coordinators last week. We talked about them just not really having answers. You remember that? Like we talked about Coach Phil Parker just standing up there and being like, like his answers kind of they weren't like, they didn't have real hard answers to why they're struggling in some of the areas that they are this year. And I got the same feeling from Coach Ferentz is like, he's talking about, I think his quote was something along the lines of, yeah, you look in the last month, you can grab a couple examples of us playing really well and being a good football team, and you can grab some examples of the opposite as well. And I don't know if they have concrete answers to give you guys. And then you take that to the quarterback situation, and he said clearly cloudy about 10 times as like a joking sort of all-encompassing explanation or status of the team, of the quarterback situation, of their spot in the season right now. I really think that they're on their heels a little bit.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's the right way to read it, Tyler. I mean, it's one of those things where we can push so far, and I know people want answers, but I truly believe at this point in time, they don't have any.
There isn't. Yeah.
There isn't an answer. And I think if we want to dive in the deep, I mean, we are all off season too, but
oh yeah, we do.
The transfer portal, I think, is gonna be something in itself. Let me put it that way.
I'm so excited for when we do the off season of this podcast, we try to heavy load that almost exclusively if we could. It's hard to get 2 interviews a week. But we try to heavy load that with just interviews of either the guys that are about to graduate, any kind of recent guy, any guy that played, any Iowa athlete, just like interviews. We want guests.
Yep.
Every once in a while, occasionally, spring ball rolls around. Sometimes in the offseason, something happened. Last year, the Lester thing, the hire, all that. There will be something every 2 or 3 weeks on average that's worth us getting on and having a legitimate saturated hour plus conversation on. But if we were to try and do that twice a week, there really isn't a lot in the offseason. Like, you're making things up. And this offseason that's upcoming, as the content
connoisseur.
Yeah, okay, well, no, not connoisseur. The driving force behind what each of one of our shows is supposed to be about, knowing that fans expect like 1 or 2 episodes a week from us. I am the most relaxed, still not really relaxed about it, but the most relaxed I've ever been, because it feels like this offseason is going to have the most to talk about and do episodes about on maybe a weekly basis. So
that's without a doubt. I mean, the position battles, the roster attrition, the transfer portal, like, there's going to be concrete storylines that you can actually go forward with. Instead, look, as somebody who, does radio as well, does writes all this stuff, hypotheticals are kind of what we make a living off of to some degree, because people want to hear it, people want to talk about, etc. But there's gonna be a lot to talk about. The quarterback situation, I'll tell you what, that got even a lot more fun potentially. And by the way, Marco Linus is back.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I can speak for myself and my immediate colleagues. I don't think anybody expected him to come back this early, just based on the injury and the surgery. It's a little bit surprising, quite frankly. But then you also got to think about, that they missed, quote unquote, on their last quarterback in the cycle. They're down right now. So does that mean they have to take 2 quarterbacks in the portal again? And that's where it gets really interesting as well. How much money do they get spent on that? Iowa probably needs to throw a boatload of money at an edge rusher, because they need a go-to pass rusher. I know I talked about that with you last week. Like, I don't envy the job Brad Heinrichs is going to have to do. It's going to be interesting. And I've said it before, and this might come across as a little bit brash, but there are people on our board and a few people I've seen argue about whether they should start Cade McNamara or Jackson Stratton. For as much as I've criticized Cade McNamara, if Cade McNamara is healthy at near 100%, you 100% play him. It's quite frankly, it's not a discussion. And people talked about, they want to see what they have in Jackson Stratton, get a glimpse of the future. If you are relying on a walk-on transfer quarterback from Colorado who completed 4 of his 17 career passes, who was playing scout team linebacker a month ago, to be the future of the most important position in football, you have a hell of a lot bigger issues with your football team than that.
It's gotten to a really funny place.
And no offense to Jackson Stratton, like I'm not trying to like clown on the kid, but you have to keep it real.
No, kid came in and balled. I mean, I'm actually going to get to him in a second because some of the more like looking past the superficial things that KF said and the way he kind of reacts to questions.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot for Stratton here in a second, but it is funny that the question between Stratton or Cade. I was in a place a couple weeks ago, really since the Troy game, I think was the first time you and I talked about, hey, we should probably give Sullivan a chance here, right? When it came down to when it came down to Sullivan or Cade, there was this conversation of, okay, once you figure out or are shown that they're pretty close, like top end, what they're going to be able to do as far as winning ball games, like you see the downside of what Sullivan and his play style presents with the turnovers and injury risk and all that with the UCLA game. You're like, okay, so he's not Johnny Manziel. Like he's not the savior, right? There was a point though where it was like, but we have to play Brendan because he does give us just that extra thing the defense has to worry about. And he is potentially the future, right? Now, after that game, you're like, okay, with the way that the transfer portal, and this is going to be a discussion 10, 20 times over this offseason. Part of all that offseason stuff is with the way the transfer, you see what Colorado did in 2 years and the way that they approach the portal, other teams approaching the portal. Indiana goes and gets a O'Rourke from
Ohio,
like
a bunch of people there.
What you can do in a 1 to 2 year process. I get that Brendan could be the future. Like, hey, get him more time in the offense, get less, all these things we've talked about. But if you're a Division I program, a top 20 program in the country, you have to be a program that is when you have what you have with Brendan Sullivan, that's not enough. He's not the clear future either. So now we're to the point where he's not even available anymore. Really sucks, by the way, because I actually love watching Brendan Sullivan play.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, we're now back to this hurt on and off again Cade McNamara, who has 2 to 3 games left in his career, or this Jackson Stratton, who is literally like, it's like a circus, the fact that he's even playing. I've almost swung back to Cade is likely got the higher floor, right?
Yeah.
Even if somehow, some way, in a couple weeks worth of getting practice reps as a 1 with the ones, Jackson Stratton proves to have somehow a higher ceiling. You put Cade in there. He's just got too much experience. You've got 2 games left, and I think at this point you do almost bring into the picture like, okay, at this point it's 8-4 at best, could be 6-6. Cade is the senior. He's given a lot to the program. We paid him a lot of money. All that stuff doesn't hold zero weight. Let the guy play out his last 2 games, and like we'll see what Stratton and Sullivan can do going into spring, plus anybody else that we go out and get. Make it a 3 or 4 quarterback race, and let's just let Cade take us into the
let it rip.
Really somber, very gray postseason. Let him have his last 3 games. Like it's
yeah. There's one important thing that you'll appreciate that I think you missed a little bit, but I agree with almost everything you said. They owe it to the senior class to play the guy that's best able to win them games right now, not look in the future. Look at Jay Higgins. Think about all the 5th and 6th year guys, regardless of the results of this season. Think about the guys that foregone the NFL. They didn't go to the NFL. They came back. Now, look, they probably got paid a decent amount of money to come back, but they're still getting paid more in the NFL than they are to come back. For the love of the program, Jay Higgins is probably going to be an All-American again. He won't win the Buckets because I just think Iowa's record is too poor right now, and that sucks. He got robbed last year. I will stand on business. That's crap. Jamari Harris, 6th year. Sebastian Castro coming back. Nick Jackson, who just passed Luke Kuechly in career tackles, by the way.
Is he number 1?
He's number 2 right now. He's like 32 behind the all-time leader.
I would just
feed. There's a chance.
I'd just feed that guy.
I want him to get it. I want him to get it.
Run after everything, Nick. You get this tackle. I would get it for him.
I don't know if you saw the clip. I told Nick that he passed Luke Kuechly, and he goes, "You have to put an asterisk next to it. Luke did it in 3 years. I got double his time."
Kuechly is. I mean, Kuechly is potentially the like when you think football player in the dictionary, Kuechly, I think, shows up. That's another discussion.
Bob Sanders is probably in that same category too. Bob.
Yeah, true.
But yeah, no. So I mean, I think you owe it to the seniors to play the guy, and like regardless of how people feel about Cade, I think we all know how people feel about Cade. And I'm saying this is, again, you brought up your Discord last week as somebody who's probably been the biggest quote unquote Cade McNamara hater among people.
David Eichelt's a hater.
Got that haterade. Cade deserves to play.
Yeah.
If he's healthy. Just based on what's available. And I think the team would rally around him. But another thing that I meant to bring up earlier about my tinfoil hat theory. Cade wasn't a team captain this week either, Tyler.
Well, okay. So that's thank you for bringing it back around. So then I was going to ask David, why then do we not really mention Cade as a primary topic to start the opening statement? Why, when asked, like, there's 3 or 4 clarifying questions, several of your colleagues are like, okay, hold on, I'm confused about the Cade.
It was weird.
Is like Cade is available, he's back, and then finally you get the answer out of him that's like, yes, Cade has been cleared to play, but we're not sure from a coaching standpoint if he can be effective. And we're only talking about being more effective than Jackson Stratton. And he's not a captain. There's no travel concerns. He's been cleared.
Welcome to the loony bin.
I don't know. I don't know. This is just me having fun on a Wednesday with David Eichelt, but like, it's not nothing. I know this. We've had captains in the past. And again, it could be nothing.
Sure.
It could just be whatever. But we've had captains in the past where if they were in this situation, let me think of one. James Morris. Linebacker, 2010, 11, 12, 13.
God, he's probably one of my more underappreciated players in my all-time rankings. Sorry, I always think of middle linebackers, and I don't think
he is potentially, at least for my time, and I'd love to ask Coach this question in his 26 years, of the most respected players all time.
Yeah.
Where does he rank? It's top 10 for sure. And in 26 years, there's been a lot of players. In my time, he's number 1 for me personally as a teammate. If James Morris got a concussion, and then all of a sudden the next week he was not cleared to play, and a plane ride and travel was going to mess with his recovery, he had to stay home. Somebody else was nominated a captain for that week, and we came back, and he was then available to play. James Morris would have then been a captain again. 100%. No doubt. He would have been the first one, unanimous. Cade is so there's something there. There's something where he, I don't know. But
I'm not trying to. Yeah, I think that's a very fair point, and I think it's important prefacing we're not insinuating anything about Cade's character, but just lines up with they're traveling. There are certain things to it, and even again, another thing that stuck out to me, Tyler, was when Kirk kind of joked, "Oh, I'll probably know who's starting Friday night, but you won't." Well, does that mean Cade's traveling? Like you better know before Friday who's starting.
Well, he'll be traveling because they just simply don't have enough guys to not travel him.
Yeah.
But the thing about that is like, again, and this is where I come back to, I think they really are on their heels. I think, and now I'll bring in Stratton to this. I think the way that Kirk talked about Stratton is really eye-opening, both to him, like my evaluation of it is Kirk is flabbergasted with how well Stratton looks. And again, relative to just like what we need in a division quarterback, that's probably still not what we need. But relative to what Kirk thought he would look like versus what he does look like with just a couple weeks of actual reps, I think he is amazed at how well Stratton is doing, the way he's talking about him. They asked what changed in a week or whatever. Like, how confident were you going into UCLA versus he's like, I'm a whole hell of a lot more confident. I think he's been pleasantly surprised with how Stratton's stepped in and at least manned the position, right? He doesn't look like an absolute catastrophe.
And I think the other part is you got to think about how many opportunities there are going to be to make plays if Jackson Stratton starts, because you know damn well what Maryland's going to do, right?
Yeah, they're going to make him. They're going
to put 9 in the box.
Yeah, you're going to have to throw the ball. And low key, I think he might be able to do it. Like,
he made a couple big throws last week that I was impressed by.
To come in and throw on third down and just start slinging it.
Yeah.
A couple of them were like just past the defender's fingertips. The way that Lester talked about last week in the press conference, how Stratton is a guy who he didn't recruit, but if he was in high school now, he's the kind of quarterback that he would recruit.
Yes. Yep.
I think, I mean, again, this season is like whatever. And there's actually, I had a good sort of point come to mind of why the season still does matter. Listening to the press conference, we'll get to that in a second, maybe. But again, I think Stratton's rise in 3 weeks and what he's been able to do in practice, Kirk loves practice, and Cade's, maybe this time without Cade as a starting quarterback for the last two and a half games or whatever, it's been a maybe we don't need Cade, right? And now there's this indecision, there's this gray area that is, I mean, Friday, we're just going to see who's slinging it better. And I like legitimately when he says, I don't know, you guys won't know the starter, but I hope I do, or I will. Like, I think they might actually make the decision on Friday. Not a good spot to be for a divisional football team, but I think it's legit. I think it's legitimate. And I think a little bit of KF's sort of lighthearted, almost nervous energy was like, this is not a spot that we're usually in, and I'm going to make light of it and jokes. And he starts the thing off with like, oh, we've moved from 12:01 to noon. Like, I'll ask the questions. What's going on with that? Like,
see, I liked it, and you're exactly right. That was one where I'm like, he kept pushing a couple of times. And I was like, okay, this is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But you're right. I think this is something that Kirk, I think maybe the sicko side of him is enjoying. I think it's going to keep him up at night a little bit. Maybe. But I think there's a sick side of him that he's kind of like, you know what? Let it rip. Because he used the phrase again, let it rip.
And maybe, yes. And I think maybe to the point, because there is a point where and I would imagine it has to be now, at least 4 losses, all the expectations, the schedule lining up, all this stuff. There's a point at which inside KF, even if he never tells anybody else, to him, the season is a disappointment or an underachieving season. I think we've hit that point. I don't think that's a hard argument to make. I think for everybody, top down, starting at Kirk to the least, to someone who's not even an Iowa fan, just a college football fan, they're like, Iowa had an underachieving season. Everybody, 100% of people is on board. I don't think you could find a person in the country that goes, no, I don't think they're underachieving.
Unless, they're just wrong in the first place.
Sure.
Like, I mean, there's people with just a certain distorted reality, and they'll say that, but guess what? There's nothing that they can say that'll actually back it up.
Right.
Because it's so much easier to talk about what a disappointing season it is. But I'll tell you what, and again, you and I will sit here 6 months from now, and I'll keep it real with you. The over-under win total for next year right now is going to be set at 5.5. That's why I talk to my guys in Vegas. It's going to be 5.5. And I think the more statistically, I think it's going to be -120 for under 5.5 and over -110 for over 5.5. But again, you look at that schedule, Tyler, like 3 of the top 5 current teams in the college football playoff poll are coming to Kinnick Stadium.
I'm glad we're in Kinnick and not there.
Oregon, Penn State.
Where Indiana. I was going with it. Yeah, I know. I get it. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about that. Where I was going.
That's just like where I'm going. Like to go back to Kirk, I think that's what also looking back is going to make this season a little bit more painful. Just because unless they find a way to do that 1 year turnaround in that portal and they actually go all in on the portal. I love Tim Lester's philosophy. I think if they stay true to that mantra about every position every year, that's exactly right, because that's how you adapt to college football. And the last thing I'll say about that specifically is you brought up Indiana earlier. We're not talking about Indiana basketball, guys. We're talking about a bottom 5, Power 5 program in the history of college football. Right. I don't care about their schedule. They have not just scraped by the teams they've been beating. They've been destroying every team that they've been playing besides Michigan. But that's,
if I was an Indiana fan, just this is just another tangent about what you just brought up. I would be so annoyed and over all of the Indiana discussion with the CFP stuff right now that just came out last night as we record this. Like the fact that there's a huge push, a lot from the SEC side of things to like, 11, like if Indiana loses one of these,
oh my God,
their next game or one of these games, 11-1 Indiana should not be in. Like, I would be so furious as an Indiana fan. Anyway.
Yeah.
I think Kirk is to the point where it's an underachieving season. I do think looking back, you can say like, 10 years from now, they're going to look back and say that season was so painful. I think there's a caveat to that is, and maybe it's just an excuse, but I think there will be the asterisks of, but the quarterback situation health-wise did get so bad that who knows if they would have even been able to execute towards the end of the year, right? Like that's always going to be a what if to the negative side of like, yeah, what if they were 8-2 right now? But then they have all this quarterback issue, and then they just lose to Maryland and Nebraska because they don't have a quarterback, and they still end
up that's where I agree with you. If that happens, that should 100% be taken into account. But when you talk about the road struggles they've had, it's on the defense, and I think that's why it's been so disappointing on top of everything else. Is just because we certainly did not expect the defense to take that drastic of a step back, and again, they're still a top 30 defense, which is insane to me.
Yeah.
Just because based off eye test, but maybe that's because you and I have gotten so used to this elite top 3, top 5.
I think it's everybody. I talked about this last week. I was like, it's so crazy that we talk about the defense in the way that we do this year, and then you look and it's like, the defense is 26th in the country.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, that's really how spoiled we've been. That we're talking about the 26th best out of 130. You're a 82nd percentile defense team, maybe 80 higher than that. And we're like, wow, we can't win games. They got to figure it out. We're going to we've got issues, right?
Ultimately, it goes back to what I said last week, which I thought was some people may have thought was a hot take, but I'll stand by it. I think psychologically Iowa broke when they lost to Iowa State.
Yeah.
I really, really think that just put the season not on a crash course, but it was set up to not be as successful as we all thought in the preseason. And I think 10 years from now, when Kirk thinks about his most disappointing losses, that's going to rank up at least probably in the top 5 to top 10.
Because I'll put my stamp of approval agreement on that one for sure. That individual game is definitely one to look back at and be like, wow, that was. I always think about the Wisconsin game in 2015 as a call it a stepping stone or a momentum game. And I go all the way back to my high school career when I was in Marshalltown, 2009. We never even made the state playoffs, let alone could we were fighting for winning seasons. Like 5-4, 6-3 was good in high school. We beat West Des Moines Valley in 2009 in the 3rd game of the year. Last second field goal, barely made it over the post. And that game gave that high school Bobcat team a confidence to go and win the rest of the games, run the table, go to the state championship, ended up falling short runner-ups that year. But if you don't beat Valley if we don't beat Wisconsin in 2015, 10-6, do we still have a great season? Yeah, but do we end up beating Indiana? Because there's something to that whole, like, we haven't been broken yet. If you're undefeated, like, and Indiana's got it right now. They're like, they have a better chance.
Go back to Iowa State when they got beat by Kansas. We saw what happened the following week.
And then they lose again, right? When you get cracked, it's not just that single crack. Like, it makes further cracking easier.
Yep.
And I agree. I think that one play where Noel or Higgins runs by Wampa for a 75-yard, I think that and that easy drive in 45 seconds in a 52-yard field goal, I think that cracked us. And but nonetheless, like
But
it's over now. We can't do anything about it. I think part of that, hey, we've underachieved this year, let it rip mentality is like Kirk's just like, yeah, we're playing with house money now. Like we don't in a bad way. Like we don't have anything else to lose. I'm gonna put my tinfoil hat on for the last part of this episode.
Love it.
And this is really reaching. Kirk's current contract goes through 2029.
Oh boy.
Yep.
Oh
everybody,
boy.
Everybody knows where I'm going.
Yep. All right.
I want Coach Ferentz to coach until 2049. Right?
Yep.
Biggest KF guy there is.
Yep.
He was asked about, he starts with his opening statement of like, wow, I've never, like college football, the way things are changing. I've never had 2 Saturdays in a row to sit and watch, because they played on Friday.
Oh, that's a good tip. Yeah.
I've never had 2 Saturdays in a row. That, that's new. Never had that before. Talks about his biggest concern right now is the distractions to the players late in the season. And he says right now there's more than ever. Later on, he gets asked in the press conference, he gets asked about Mark Farley, and he likens himself to, yeah, we're 2 of the same vintage. And Mark Farley's whole thing was, I'm out. I can't, I don't want to deal with this bullshit NIL, all this stuff. David, I'm asking you right here, right now, 32 minutes into this podcast, what is Kirk Ferentz's appetite to continue coaching college football right now?
All right, so this is not anything I'm hearing. This is totally gut feel. So I want to preface it by saying that so people don't just start blowing up about this, right? One, I think there were other issues with Farley. I'm not saying it's a one-to-one there, but
I
think he got pushed toward retirement.
Well, they're dog shit too right now. So that's part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I give it a 20% chance that KF calls it after this year.
Okay.
Maybe 15 to 20. Okay. I don't think Kirk's going to finish his current contract. I think.
Oh, I don't either. Yeah, I don't think he makes it to 29.
I think he wants the Big Ten wins record, no matter what he says about it and how much he downplays it.
Which he would get next year.
If he wins, yes, he will. Okay, I won't go that far, but he's still, I believe, five short of breaking it right now. So he needs to win out, get a couple wins next year. He could probably get it at home. I think they play Albany in the 3rd game of the year. Yep. I have not looked that far ahead. I'm not going to say it's the most likely scenario, but I will not be surprised whatsoever if Kirk /years next season.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say if there was some weird, sick betting odds right now, you're like, okay, does he finish his contract? Does he hang? He's not going to hang it up 1 year before his contract, right? So is it 2027 that's his last year? Is it 2026? Is it 2025? Or is it this year in 2024? I would say if you were to run that poll on Twitter, and you had 4 options, and you don't get to like rank them, you just get to pick one option.
Yes.
I think the majority percentage relative to the other options, maybe not over 50%, but like it would be like 37, 30, 25, whatever that works out to equal 100. Yep. I think the largest percentage of the 4 would be he finishes this year, he goes 1 more year, gets the wins record, calls it after the 2025 season. That's probably where the best money would be betting wise.
That's where I agree. Again, it's solely gut feel, and to be honest with you, I think it makes all the sense in the world because I don't think you want to see KF go out like Hayden Fry.
No, nobody wants to see that.
I don't think, and Kirk doesn't deserve that. He's going to get a statue. It's going to be well deserved. And then I think that whenever Iowa gets in the coaching search, it is going to be one of the more interesting searches that the Big Ten Conference and even college football, quite frankly, has had in a long time, from this whole part of Iowa's the most stable job in college football.
Correct.
Without a doubt. I think it's a low-end top 15 job in college football. No worse than top 20 in my opinion. And Beth Getz is going to have one of the most important decisions an Iowa athletic director's ever had. And that's when I think you and I talked about this off the air one time. I said Beth Getz is going to be the most important hire in the last 40 years for Iowa athletics because she had to replace Lisa Bluder. She's probably going to have to replace Brands. She's probably going to have to replace Frey McCaffrey, and she's going to have to replace Kirk Ferentz.
Yeah.
That's wild.
That's a legacy.
Dude. That's setting an entire generation of Hawkeye fans up in whatever direction it's going to be, just based on the leadership that she puts
in about 20 to 30 years, there's a large contingent of Iowa fans, basically our generation, right? People in their young, like 20s and 30s.
Yep.
I'm not even 20 anymore. I'm old. Who are now going to have the majority, potentially, if these coaches stick around and that Iowa longevity stays a thing, and there's 4 coaches that step in and they're all here for another 15 to 20 years. There could be a lot of, and I guess if it's bad at that point, then maybe there will be changes made before then. But there could be a lot of fans that are like, wow, what a hire Beth gets, where she then went on to hire 4 more people who have continued this legacy of Iowa sports. Or Beth is going to have a lot of ins and outs over the next 20 years. Like, oh, that person sucked for 5 years. Get another one in here. It is the weight of her decisions. Those are heavy. Those are big.
I'm huge on Beth Getz. I think she was an amazing hire. I think she's done an outstanding job. She's everywhere at everything all the time. It's really impressive. She's been very accessible from our standpoint.
Yeah, what they do,
appreciate it's
the forward-facing ability of an AD, or at least a good AD, is actually absurd to me. I don't think they ever sleep.
I do think it's worth pointing out one thing, just to be a contrarian, at least the other side of the argument. Kirk is and I think you mentioned it, Kirk is very much like, he doesn't want to leave the program or whatever in shambles. He wants the foundation to remain the same. And he wants it to be strong for whoever would come in the following year. So if he feels like it's broken after next season for any reason whatsoever, I can see Kirk going, all right, I'm going to take one more year.
Yeah.
And then put things back on the right track and at least allow whoever's going to be next to take off with it. And I'll say this too, as much as I respect Kirk Ferentz from a fan standpoint, like from a college football fan standpoint, there is absolutely no way that Kirk should be allowed to pick the next Iowa football coach. And I don't think he wants to, and I hope Beth doesn't let him if for some reason he wants to. This needs to be a full, thorough search whenever it is, because they've never had one. And Iowa has now set up enough of a history, a tradition, the resources to be able to go out. And quite frankly, Tyler, they should be able to steal a Power 4 head coach if they want to.
And this is what makes the hire so interesting to me, because, and I don't think my feelings are going to change on this. Part of me agrees with you. Part of me disagrees with you. I think he should have it. I think there is a part of me that's like, man, there's a reason this stability is so respected. It's because of what KF has done. Yep. Maybe he shouldn't pick the coach, but he should have at least be able to voice his opinion on his favorites. And then, like, hey, if they decide to go a different direction, whatever. But I think people should respect his thoughts and hear them. And as a former player, and I think a lot of fans even who are like, nah, we don't want, like, even fans who are like, fire KF. You know, there's been plenty of those with enough liquid courage on a Saturday afternoon. I think even a lot of them are on board if you say, hey, LeVar or Wallace are the next head coach. Like, I think there's a lot of excitement between those two guys. But because of the stability of that job, and I agree with you, and maybe it's just, it's like home bias, and I think of the world of Iowa, like, it's going to be a national, like a tasty little treat that's put up on a national platter. And you can't just say, this is not as easy as the Jan Jensen hire, right?
Absolutely not.
It's not just like, oh yeah, Wallace, you're in, or LeVar, you're in. Football is bigger than women's basketball.
I'm happy you brought that up. I said the same thing on KXNO on Monday. I said the Jan Jensen hire, there was never anybody else that could take over. But it's a completely different level when you're talking about not just 15 players and you have 3 assistants.
Right.
You have over 100 plus people involved in a college football program. You need somebody with like that sort of experience, and you have to expand all your horizons. And I'm very happy you brought that up.
And it doesn't mean that LeVar or Seth are not the guy. I think they very likely could be the guy. But it has to mean that you go further and look at more than just those two.
Yes.
Because you might have some really appetizing options. Like, you never know.
Iowa can go out and get a Power 4 head coach. I've said it. From the coaching perspective, and this is where I want people to keep, and just casual football fans, this is what they need to realize. There's a difference between how you or me look at top jobs, right, Tyler?
Yeah.
Versus how coaches look at the top options. What are Iowa's resources? What's the stability like? Do they want to be there a long time? What are the fans' expectations versus the amount of pressure? What are the resources? How much NIL funding are they going to get? What conference are they in? What are the facilities like? You have to take all of those sort of things into contention. And who knows? What if a top 10 sitting head coach, what if he valued the most important thing to him is stability?
Mm-hmm.
He wants to coach one more place for 20 years, call it good. There's still a couple of those breeds. I'm not saying he would go to Iowa.
But he'd look.
He'd probably get a damn good interview.
He'd look. I can't. For as much as I want KF to stay, and I'm like KF is God. That's an exaggeration.
Yeah.
For everybody listening. I respect the man to the 10th degree, and I want him to coach forever. But I know that at some point that is no longer the case. And when that time comes, I cannot wait. I hope it's divulged. I cannot wait to hear the list of names that took an interview, because I think the full list of names might surprise the shit out of people. I think that coaches around the country value the Iowa job higher than any other person, staff, fans, opposing fans, the play. Like, I think opposing coaches are going to value that position at a crazy level. And that's why it's going to be tough to see LeVar or Seth get in that position. They have something that those other coaches don't, but those other coaches potentially have something that they don't either, which is head coaching experience at a major college football level. So
Seth Wallace is undefeated. Tyler.
1-0, baby.
1-0.
1-0.
Oh, no, again, I told you at the beginning of the episode, we both said it.
Wallace is my guy, by the way. Wallace is my fucking guy.
Yeah.
If Tyler Kluver's tasked with picking the next head coach, there is no search. Seth Wallace, welcome to your fucking office, baby. You're the head man. But
you know Seth Wallace reminds me of?
Who?
Dan Campbell.
Yes, a little bit, like an older, slightly less grisly version of Dan Campbell. And dude,
I just pieced that together in my brain. I'm like, I've heard Seth Wallace on the sidelines. I've heard how he talks. I'm like, holy shit, this is a carbon copy.
Yeah.
Like a slightly watered down, like less roid heavy. And I'm not saying Dan Campbell's on steroids, but like, you know what I mean? Like, it's different.
So just I bring that up, 10-minute conversation there to end this show of like, it becomes more relevant every year. And yes, I'm fishing. I'm playing it up. But at some point, it's going to be legit. I don't think anybody expected Lisa Bluder to come out and say, you know what, I'm done. And maybe a couple did, but it wasn't like everyone was just waiting for it. We're further along in that process with KF than we were with Lisa. And Lisa was like, fuck it, I'm retiring. KF at any point could say, you know what? Me and Mary, we're going to Barbados. Iowa Hawkeye football, you're on your own. And
let me tell you this quick story about the Lisa retirement quick then we can end it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say the source, but I was texting a source 3 years ago just about, Lisa's future and kind of what her timetable is, because I'm like, they have a chance to elevate themselves. Like, there's a lot of things going for them. And this is before they beat South Carolina in the Final Four. Yeah. But I got the text message that said, and I quote, I'll be stunned if Lisa coaches past Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
And I'm like, really? I'm like, she still seems she's in the prime of her career, et cetera. And they just said, watch. And I'm like, okay. Right after that announcement dropped, I texted that same person. I went all the way back in my messages history, replied to it, and said, kudos. Holy shit.
And that's the thing is like you.
And it was somebody who wouldn't know, by the way.
Right. And there's people that are closer to KF than we are, right? There's people that are, and me and you are theoretically closer than 99% of people. You report and see the guy every week. I'm a former player of the guy. Like, but there's people that are closer. Talk to him on a regular basis. there's also just the fact that when you're in your 60s and
70 next year,
70, like we are approaching it from a different mindset of like, oh my God, you're the coach of a Division I football program. Everything must be great. Everything. It's like the man's 70. He did it. He's got all the money in the world. He wants to go spend it on his grandkids and just chill. Like there is a life, there's a real person behind the persona of Coach Ferentz.
Yeah.
That person, you know, the average, I'm not going to get into like Coach Ferentz health issues, but like when you reach 70, just at a population level, I think our life expectancy in America is like 80, maybe even worse.
Yeah.
Like you're on the back end of your life. Time to go enjoy life. So there is that whole thing. And
I was going to say KF, by the way, for people wondering, KF is in great shape. Oh. Like he's incredibly fit. He's still sharp as can be. Like I would not be worried from a health standpoint about KF. You're exactly right. When you think about 3 or 4 or 5 years, like statistically something's bound to at least flare up or and I'm not saying like I'm just saying like just normal things, right? It gets hard to get out of bed. There's certain things that happen.
I'm just saying when you're 70, it's hard for you and I at 30 years old to imagine the mindset, the energy, the effort that's required and the motivation to go do that when, dude, when I'm 30 right now and I'm already thinking about when I'm 55 or 60 years old, how done I'll be with any kind of like job.
Yeah.
And that's just because I'm a lazy piece of shit. And KF is different. He's different than me. But at some point, you're done.
Yeah.
Right. And I think our whole conversation I think there's a lot of validity to it. And again, it's relevant whether you like it or not. And
it's as close to being realistic as it has been the past several years, maybe outside of the 2020 stuff.
Yeah.
Like I feels like we've talked about this every year. I will say for the past couple of years, I've never felt like it was a real discussion, but I understood why we had to continue having it. This is the first time outside of 2020 that it feels like it's getting closer and closer to reality.
Yeah. And it is. And it just inevitably is. And that's the rabbit hole. I'll just title this one The Rabbit Hole.
The Rabbit Hole, yeah. Well, hey, we called it within the first 90 seconds. Like, we're just going to go on and on. Like,
well, there you go. KF Press Review Show. A lot to review today. A lot of speculation. Could be all bullshit. It's kind of the industry we're in. It's just all bullshit. David Eichel joins us once again. Really enjoying this show, man. I love what we've done here this year.
It's been a lot of fun.
It has been so much fun. We'll have to find a way to touch base, continue it in some form in the off season because I love touching base. That's it. You're going to hear this immediately on Wednesday as it drops. Thursday, you'll hear the preview show for Maryland, 5-10-5 show with Coach Lima on Friday. And then the boys absolutely have to win this one on Saturday. We'll talk to you at those times. See you then.